Hello and welcome to another episode of Releasing Your Inner Dragon with Drake and Marie. I am one of your two hosts, Maxwell Alexander Drake. I'm an award-winning novelist, game designer, comic book writer, teaching writing all over the world. As always, with me is my co-host, Marie.
Hi, my name is Marie Mullaney. I write epic fantasy and I run a fantasy world-building channel on YouTube.
Today, we're going to take this episode to edit something that was submitted to us by one of you guys. But before we get into it, as always, please like, subscribe, share, all that great stuff. We are getting really close to hitting that magical 1,000 download a month kind of thing. So we really need you guys' help to help us get over the hump on that. I know you got writer friends out there. I know you got social media. I know you can share this out there. I mean, if you're listening and you've been listening this long, you're obviously getting something out of it. So please help us out a little bit. Just share it to your friends or even your enemies. I don't really care if you like these people or not. Just share it to them. So, all right, let's get into it.
Yeah, so I'm going to share my screen.
By the way, if you're listening on a podcast, we do have this entire episode up on our Releasing Your Inner Dragon YouTube channel. So if you'd like to watch us as we're editing this, you can actually read along with us and everything like that. Head on over to YouTube. While you're there, like, subscribe, all of that great stuff. But otherwise, we will be trying to verbalize everything that you would normally see. So if you're just listening on this podcast, hopefully you'll get the same benefit out of it. But a picture paints 1,000 words. So head on over to YouTube if you want to watch us actually edit this.
So I'm going to read basically the whole first page, because what we want to discuss about this specific piece, you have to get the whole page in order to understand the context. Okay. Again, John's strength ebbed from his hands like the fabled tides of yore. Numbness slithered down through his palms and past his wrists. Joints unlocked. Muscles evaporated and endurance faltered. The cumbersome wooden tray trembled in his loosened grip. Bowls of lamb stew transformed into hefty boulders. Pressure on his thumbs forced cramping. A seizing spasm electrocuted the nerves back up through his arms. The tray fell forward, and molten globs of goulash catapulted as a flaming arsenal. Jeering laughter reverberated off the ancient stones of the great hall. The ribald revelers tossed half-chewed rye rolls and limp stalks of celery. Most missed John, but a lucky few dinged against them. Soggy chunks caught in his hair or smeared liquid mush down his face. Meaty fingers clamped onto his shoulder. Thick pinchers tweaked his ear, yanking him up. It must have been the keep's cook. No one else would deal with him. John pressed the bowls to his chest. He couldn't drop them again. He was already in enough trouble. The residue burned through his coarse shirt. He ignored the scorching pain as he fretted over his punishment. After all, it was his own fault. People deserved their hardships. Everyone knew that. Sickness, misfortune, and strife were the god's punishment for a life of wickedness. That's what Istaben said anyway. The priest of the earth goddess had reminded John so as he caned him and dismissed him from his service, sent him back to his father. The penalty for spilling ink upon precious translations. There went the final chance for John to make something of himself. Now only the realm of servitude remained. He knew what he'd done to anger the five gods, and he was sorry. Had begged forgiveness 100 times. Okay. Do you want to start?
Yeah. And let's start with the first word. So scroll up. Now, I've been told that this is the opening of the new story. So chapter 1, page 1, first thing you've ever read. If this was being submitted to an agent or a publisher, they would not read past the first word, one word, and it would be rejected. And the reason is very simple. You can't start a brand new story with the word again. For the most part, there are some very rare exceptions because nothing has happened yet. So you can't tell me, just like you read before, this thing is happening. And I get what they're doing here, because it's, again, as in we already got in massive trouble for spilling something once. We actually got kicked out of the priesthood and all of that. And now we're getting in trouble again because of this. But the reader doesn't know that. And so you're already starting the story off with the reader being off balance. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing in and of itself. If the plot device of the opening scene needs the reader to be off balance, then by all means, they need to be off balance because there's a payoff to it. This doesn't. There's no payoff to it. The reader doesn't need to be off balance. The reader gains nothing by not being instantly grounded into the moment. I think that's one of the biggest, hardest things. We're going to do this. We've got another one in another podcast that we're going to be editing, where we're going to do basically the same thing, where you have to ground the reader very, very quickly. You have to ground them in the scene. You have to ground them in whose head they're in. You have to ground them in what the conflict is. And I mean the conflict of this moment, not the conflict of the story. And then if it's the opening of a chapter, it has to ground them in the hook that's going to keep them interested in wanting to continue reading. So first, this misses all of that.
Yeah.
Not just from the first word, but the entire opening misses those things. But secondly, the word again just starts the reader off in this way. Again, I haven't read anything. What are we talking about here? And this falls into the trap of one of my Drakeisms, where I talk about how when you're writing, you're actually writing two separate books at the same time and you don't realize it. You're writing one in your head and you're writing one on paper. So this author's head book was like, yeah, of course it's again, because I know that this is the second time this is happening to him because I have that knowledge. What they forget is that when you give the paper book away, the reader doesn't have the head book. They only have the book that you have in front of you. So I think that's the reason why this is done but this is the second time it's happened, because in a minute, we're going to talk about the first time. Yeah, but that's in a minute. We don't have that as information. So you're actually just causing a disjointed connection for the reader for no payoff.
I think the biggest thing for me in this opening section, and we're going to talk about the hook that we think that this should start with in a moment, but the biggest thing for me in this opening section is the verbs, and this is going to sound weird because we always say use strong verbs, but the verbs are too strong.
Yeah.
You're opening this is the kind of verbiage I'd expect when you have catapults lined up at a siege engine and you are throwing Greek fire and there is, the castle is burning down around people's ears. It is too strong for dropping a bowl of soup. It's too much.
It's all of it. It's not just the last line of the tray falling forward, molten globs of goulash catapulting as a flaming arsenal. Like, yes, that's way too strong, but it's everything. John's strength ebbed from his hands, like the fabled tides of yore. Numbness slithered down his palms. Muscles evaporated, endurance faltered. It's like he's carrying a tray of soup. Like, yeah. This is like this makes me want to think that this moment is, I have been fighting nonstop for hours to protect my family from a horde of demons that are trying to break through the front door, and I just need to hold on no, I'm just carrying a bowl of soup. Like, yeah. It's so over the top and so heavy. So yes, we want to use strong verbs and descriptive nouns 100%, but they have to balance with the tone of the scene. Now, that being said, if there was a payoff for this, it wouldn't be so egregious. The biggest reason why this is such kind of a almost hilariously slapstick over the top writing is because there is no payoff. I mean, if he tripped and the soup actually slathers over the king's face, and his skin, the king's skin, literally starts bubbling with blisters. Okay. Then there's some payoff for molten globs of flaming arsenal. But that doesn't happen. Yeah. It's just hot soup. And so, you're right. That's the big thing about this. You still have to balance your strong verbs and descriptive nouns with the tone of the moment. And I just feel like this is so over the top that it becomes comical. It becomes, which I don't think is the tone that he's trying to set here. I think he's trying to set, or she, I don't even know if it's a man or a woman who wrote this. But the writer is trying to set a tone that is more serious. And they're just going so over the top that it has become campy.
Yeah. So I agree with that. It's just, especially that opening paragraph. I mean, the only thing described to us in the first, if I look at how many words we've got here, the only thing we are aware of in the first nearly 100 words is John carrying a bowl of soup. It is a lot of words for a pretty simple action.
And I have no idea where I'm at.
Yes. I don't know. I don't know what's around me until we reach the jeering laughter.
But even that,
I was aware of other people.
Right. But even that, I don't feel like I can see anything. It's more of an amalgamous blob of things, but there's no specificity. There's nothing for me to actually, like, the ribald revelers. Okay, are they humans? Are they men? Are they women? Are they naked? Are they dressed? Are they noblemen? Are they an angry mob? Are they like there? I have no idea, because there's literally, it's such a vague statement. So even there, I don't feel like we've set anything as far as the scene is concerned. And actually, we don't in the entire first page. We do get a cook. So obviously we're, in some type of,
And keep is a word for castle. So I've got that part.
Right. We do get that's the keep's cook.
Yeah. But it's
a guarantee we're in the keep.
It's very generically described. There's a lot of John's emotion, which is good, but I also need to be able to see where I'm at.
Yeah. You are the cameraman, you are the set designer, you are the dressmaker, you are the casting director for all the extras, and the reader is just the reader. You are the entire production, and you must produce that for the reader.
Yeah. I will say that I'm actually comfortable with ribald revelers, and I'll tell you why. If you are in John's headspace, right? So you've just dropped a bowl of soup in front of a whole crowd of people sitting at a bunch of tables. You absolutely do not see individuals. In your head, they are all just people throwing food at you and laughing at you. And so I'm comfortable with that. But I would like to see the whole.
Right. That's what I'm saying. If I knew I was in the hall and I knew there was a U-tape table or an elongated table with burly men and whatever, and there were deer head on the walls and a raging fire, either against the wall or in the center of the room, or torches, or yes, if you've set the scene, then Ribald Revelers is great, because now you're just taking that crowd that we have at least been introduced to and reducing them to just a blob. And I'm fine with that.
A food throwing blob, because all we're aware of is the incoming deluge of food that's about to hit us, which that paints a great image. I approve. But
yes,
you need
but
to
only
set the
after.
Scene. Yeah. So I feel like this scene needs to be backed up like 2 minutes as John is walking towards the Great Hall.
Yes.
To and tell us like what he's walking into, like show us the Great Hall.
Yes.
Let us see the Great Hall, and
maybe
then
see the
have
kitchen a little bit before we leave.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, we're both in 100% agreement that it should be backed up 1 or 2 minutes. And then all of that needs to be shoved forward, because none of that is where I would start this story. The hook is definitely not walking into a hall. The hook is definitely not carrying a bowl of soup. The hook is definitely not dropping the bowl of soup and getting laughed at. None of that makes me care about this character or even wanting to read this story. And the biggest crime of this is it has a line written that could be one of the most powerful opening lines that I've read in a really long time. And it's only 4 words long. People deserved their hardships. You want your opening line. So when everybody says you need a powerful opening line, I don't think a lot of people understand this. And this literally encapsulates the meaning of a very awesome, powerful opening line. What we're really talking about for the powerful line is, because a lot of people are like, oh, I got to start that. It has to be a powerful line like action, like blood splattered against the wall. No, I mean, yes, okay, great. But that's not really the magic. The magic is when your first sentence screams thematic elements, when it screams esoteric human depth. And those 4 words, people deserve their hardships. It screams themes of punishment and injustice and class warfare or racial warfare or religious warfare. I mean, it literally screams the soul of humanity. And I dare someone to not continue reading after those 4 words. It is one of the most powerful opening lines that I've seen literally in decades. And the fact that it's buried at the end of the first page is just a crime, because it's so brilliantly written. And it promises a lot. It promises, so like me and you talked about this earlier, neither one of us agree that people deserve their hardships. So it's not a theme that we would agree with. But what it would do for me is I would go, oh, okay, so I'm going to follow a character who believes that people deserve their hardships, and the journey that they go on is going to prove them wrong, and they're going to become a better person at the end of this journey. From 4 words on the opening line. Now, you better deliver that. Like, you can't open the story with this much of a thematic tone and then, you know, it be a revenge story or, you know, whatever. Like, no, this opening line dictates what the thematic elements must be in this story. But it has so much possibility and so much depth. Like, it's just fantastic. And so, yeah, that's where the story needs to open, just because of those 4 words.
So I agree with that. And in fact, this whole opening paragraph is excellent. Or sorry, this whole paragraph is excellent, in my opinion.
Yes.
And yes, you could argue that this is a little bit tally, like he's telling us the backstory, but it's 2 lines that speak so directly to this character that I don't care that it's tally. It is brilliant. It's perfect.
Right. Yeah. It's not about being showy the entire time. It's about, I need to give you the backstory of this so that you understand, because if we're going to go with this scene where we're going to drop some bowls of soup, then we need the juxtaposition of, I was a fledgling priest. I was going to be one of the holy. And now I have rotten food dripping off my face and people laughing at me. And we love to use juxtapositions like that. So technically, I probably would flesh this out a little bit more and make it a little bit more showy, but you don't have to. You are correct. The fact that it is telly, but very, very short. We have 1 paragraph that gives us the fact that he used to be a priest in training. I would expand it a little bit, make it a little bit more showy, not anything like that opening paragraph by any stretch of the imagination. But the thing that's missing for me in here is his emotions of his elation to having the opportunity to have been, to work his way up a priest. I think that needs to be worked in here, even if it's in a telly manner. I would forgive that as long as it lets me know that he lost something precious to him. And the way it's written here, it's he got beaten for spilling ink. And yeah, he said he was sorry and he'd asked for forgiveness, but it doesn't let me know that he actually feels that he lost something that was very special to him. And without that high, then seeing him as a servant serving bowls of soup low is not as low. Remember, the higher we can take a character, the lower we can take the character. That's the distance between the two is what we want. So you need to have your highs and your lows, because the further the distance, the more impact it has upon the reader.
It's odd. I was just not thinking. It's odd how because we've worked together like quite intensively on Magic Fall, and how the difference between us as emotional people is so clear in things like this. Because I read this, and to me, I could feel the depth in his very emotionless tone. I could feel the depths and the hurt in which he had experienced, because that's how I'm a little bit like, I'm very turned inwards. I'm very muted in my emotions. So to me, this was very, very like emotional. And then he said, but there needs to be more. I'm like, oh, right. For people who are not muted.
Yeah, that was just to bring everyone of why we're having this kind of private joking moment. That was pretty much what it was, since she wrote the first draft and I came through and did the much bigger edit on the back end. Most of my edits were, okay, so you took it to 7. Now let me take it to 11. Like, you gave it some emotion, but let me really make you weep because of this, or make you really excited that's happening or whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, that's, but we all have our weaknesses. We talked about, there was plenty of weaknesses that I have that you
no, but I mean,
in those holes.
Like, it's also a difference in how people read emotions, because as I said, like, I read this and I felt that emotion, because it was, despite the fact that it's muted, to me, that kind of muted emotion speaks of a depth, because that's how I feel emotions, right? So it's just like a difference in readers as well.
It is,
like,
and I'm not going to say that I'm correct. I just, my writing style is always to force you to feel the moment, force you to feel the joy, force you to feel the pain, force you to feel the romance. I don't want to hint at it.
I think that your leaning into emotions is, I mean, I think that it's more common for readers to read like you than it is for readers to read like me. Right?
I agree.
So I think that it's probably the more correct way is to go for the deeper emotions. It just amused me. It's just,
yeah.
But yeah, so I would start, like Drake, I agree. Start with this. Then transition from this into the moment just before the Great Hall. Then take then trip and fall and have the moment of like, I've lost it, and the cook and everything else.
So I do have a warning on that.
Yeah.
And this is my abhorrence to double dipping. And we're using a plot device twice in rapid succession. He was clumsy and he got kicked out of the priesthood. He is now clumsy, is going to get punished here. Now, if clumsy is a thread that is going to be consistent with this character throughout, I might be less concerned about that. However, me personally, it would be easier for me to change the spilling of the ink as the reason for him getting kicked out of the priesthood, as opposed to changing the whole spilling of the soup scene. So I'd be looking at that. I'd be looking at some other option for him to have done something in a blaspheming way, or whatever, and not blaspheme, but in a way that got him in trouble and kicked him out of the priesthood. And we're only assuming that it's priesthood because we have, the fact that it was a priest and the Irish goddess and all of that.
Yeah.
We haven't read much of this story, so I'm not trying to write this story for the author. It could have been he was trying to be a guard for them. Who knows? But the double dipping of the klutziness, especially, and it's not just the klutziness, it's the klutziness of spilling twice. So maybe he burnt one of the books or took how was he supposed to know he wasn't supposed to bring a candle into the library, to read by? Whatever. I mean, we can still do klutzy without double dipping on the spilling even. So there's just, that bothered me. But that's, again, I'm hypersensitive to double dipping on anything. I like to be as unique as possible and as many aspects as I possibly can. So if it's a klutzy character, then it can still be a klutzy thing, but spilling twice in a row is just too much for me as far as.
Yeah, I would also, I would be hesitant to spill again. Not that I'm averse to using such such repeats, but just because spilling is too common an action.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like and it's not like the spilling of the food has got such a huge payoff, you know what I mean? So it's not
Right.
like a direct, so I would be wary. But yeah.
I mean, he could come in and not spill anything, and as he's serving, somebody trips him. It could be all sorts of different things. There's a million ways to do everything. And this is where I get back to when I always say, never lock into what you're doing in a scene. Lock into why you're doing it. Yeah. So why is he falling with the soup? It's not because it's soup, and it's not because he's falling. It's not because any of that. It's to show that no one respects him, that everyone is going to laugh at him. It's to show how low he is. And that can be accomplished by, he could be out shoveling poop. He could, there's a million ways. Again, when you lock into the what am I trying to accomplish, then the how I accomplish it becomes so much more fluid, and your brain opens up on, oh, yeah, I'm just trying to show that he was here. And I mean, one of my favorite examples of this would be the opening to The Hitman's Bodyguard. So it opens up with Ryan Reynolds' character, and he's getting out of bed, and of course he's half naked, so it's Ryan Reynolds, and he's freaking gorgeous, and he's got this gorgeous woman in the bed who's obviously half naked or completely naked under the sheets, and it's gorgeous silken sheets in this massive apartment, and you look out the window, and obviously it's this beautiful view and high up, and he opens a drawer of $10,000 watches, and he puts on this suit that obviously costs thousands of dollars. He goes down, he gets into like a Lamborghini or whatever, and he drives, and he's got all these men working for him, and you find out he's a bodyguard. And he gets there, and he's like, is everything okay? And they're like, yes, everything's okay. All the teams are in place. Everything is perfect. We're all great. And they're supposed to be guarding this Japanese guy. And he gets up, they're at an airport, and he walks up onto the plane, and he turns on and waves, and he takes a bullet between his eyes and dies. And then we fade to black. And when we fade back in, we fade in on Ryan Reynolds' face. And he's sitting there in a Yugo, and he's got a broken steering wheel in front of him. He's holding a broken coat hanger for some reason. He's disheveled. He's got like the 5 o'clock shadow. He's a little pasty, and I mean, just instantly. And so you go, oh yeah, that he probably fell really far after his client. He was this high-end, wealthy, had everything. He's a little drunk, and that's next. I mean, literally, it just goes fade to black from his face with his mouth open as he, watches his client take a bullet to the head, to it literally him in a Yugo, and like the worst piece of garbage car like they could exist. And so like that transition to show the fall without ever telling the audience anything, and you don't get any of the time in between. You don't see the fall. you literally just get the moment of height and the moment of despair. And it is brilliant. It is brilliantly done in that transition. So that's what this reminds me of. I mean, obviously he didn't hit that level.
Yes.
But the opportunity is there.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the first page. And I think we're actually going to make it to the second page.
Well, that's because we didn't get into nitty gritty stuff. We were talking about more high-end story.
Yeah. I mean, we spoke a little bit about the overblown word choices.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and here's a great example. Let me do this. My Show Don't Tell book is getting ready to go on pre-sale here soon. And one of the chapters in it is utilizing strong verbs and descriptive nouns. And one of the sections under there is choose your targets carefully. And it's me talking about now I've already gone through style and tone and everything that we talked about, how that's way too heavy of verbs or anything like that. But my first example for choosing your targets carefully is this. The elven archer knocked her arrow, her keen gaze locked on the orc chieftain's bulging neck veins. So when I go in the description, I go, okay, let's look at the two verbs. The two verbs in the sentence are knocked and locked. And I'm like, they are fine. They are strong enough that they're active. They show motion. They show intent. We don't need anything. We don't need, the elven archer carefully knocked her arrow. We don't need anything. Same thing, her gaze unerringly locked. Like they don't need anything. They're fine. But if we look at the two nouns, which are gaze and the neck veins of the orc chieftain, that's where I've added a little, an adjective to each of those. We have a keen gaze, which shows the physical prowess of the elven archer, and then the bulging neck veins to bring attention to the fact of this is a vulnerable spot. This is a spot that I want to hit that's going to do the maximum amount of damage. So that's what I mean about choosing your targets carefully. And yes, I did also choose a target in that example, which I thought was, a little meta. But the reality is that's what we're doing when we're looking at our strong verbs and our descriptive nouns. We want to look for the right times to actually use those adjectives or adverbs if adverbs are usually frowned upon by me, so you'll rarely ever see me use them, but every once in a while sometimes the door just slowly closes. It's fine. It is the right strong verb for that, because it doesn't need a strong verb. It needs a weak verb, because whatever's going on in the scene and the tone, the slowly closed is the right verb. And so that's what we have in the opening of this, is that they're not the right targets. They're way over the target. I mean, you've gone, wow, there's a roach in my kitchen. Let me go get my bazooka.
Yeah.
And
you do not want to shoot for the stars in every scene's verbs. Like sometimes you want to aim at the garden gate.
I mean, I don't think it's that. It's that you have to use, if all you're trying to do is get out of the garden gate, then yes, getting a rocket that could go to the moon is probably not the vehicle that you need to get out the garden gate. So it's just overkill is what it is. It's too much power for, to quote from, what was his name? The old sitcom where he was Tim the Tool Man, where he's like, more power. Yeah, we don't need that. You don't always need more power. You need the right verbs, the right descriptive nouns for the right moments every single time. And too weak, and you weaken the moment. Too strong, and you tend to make the moment comical, where it doesn't, which is why I am working on a satirical lit RPG book, and I go over the top a lot in that, because it actually enhances the story.
Well, let me read the second page, and we see what we have to do with it. Okay, so if we go with what the author has put on the page here, we've just read that very powerful hook. He'd begged forgiveness 100 times, which we would both start with, but regardless, we're now on page 2. Not that it mattered. In the kitchen, the dueling aromas of savory meat and honey pies taunted his nostrils. He'd only received half-chewed scraps at the end of the festivities. Being the newest kitchen boy had no incentives. The man in charge of him resembled a crooked piece of metal forged by a drunken smith. John didn't know his name. Everyone called him Cook. John didn't have that luxury anymore. Cook whacked the bowls from his trembling hands. Grabbing John by the collar, he hoisted him to meet a scowling glare. The man's arm shook with irritation, not strain. You're an anal wart on the sphincter of disorder. Out, out, out! Make yourself useful. Get to the woods and pick me some oida mushrooms. Cook released his grip, and John's heart floated in his throat as he fell. Slamming onto the stones, the unpleasant eruption traveled from his rear to his mouth in a pained oof. Okay, so there's a couple of things that threw me out here. I didn't understand what this sentence meant. John didn't have that luxury anymore.
Yeah, there was at least one line on the first page too that I was just like, I don't even understand why that's even there.
And
I think he's meaning that before he could even say anything, the cook hit him, but
maybe
that's not a luxury.
Yeah, it just it doesn't seem to quite fit.
Yeah.
Then I actually want to call this back. Bowls. He has the bowls in his hands here. Now he had the bowls in his hands there. But if you drop a tray, the bowls go clattering, right? I mean, the soup, like
that was the weird thing is he didn't drop it. He actually hugs the whole thing to him, but we didn't paint that picture well enough. We get a little bit that it scalds through his rough tunic, but like it would have sloshed down his front. It would have, dripped down his thighs. Like it's liquid. It's, it's soup. You don't describe it. So soup could be, could be cream of mushroom soup and very thick. We don't know. You didn't give us that information, but you could have when he hugs it to his chest. But he didn't, he or she, I keep saying he, this author didn't really give us that visual. And that's really, again, just like in the beginning, the visuals are missing here. That's the telltale sign of every writer when they are first starting out in the craft. They do a lot of visual and a lot of action and nothing else. And visual, I mean, just like literally the visualness of the only thing that is the bare minimum of what's going on, not the scene, not the, the surrounding area, not the visceralness of everything that's going on. So, yeah. But yeah, the luxury, like what luxury? Because he calls him cook from there on out in the narrative. So how does he not have the luxury of calling him a cook? Because he's calling him a cook.
By the way, I love this. I love this whole piece of dialogue. This is amazing. This is fantastic. I love it.
Yeah.
I love the insult. I love the I love the disorder there, that little bit of world building. I love the repetition of the word out. All of that's great.
Yeah, I would have liked to, the only thing that I would like to do that would and this is just me, some people hate dialogue splicing. I like dialogue splicing. I think it adds a great pacing to it. So like if I was writing this, you're an anal wart on the sphincter of disorder. And I just want to say, you said it was a great piece of world building, but I want to expand upon that to make sure everyone understands that. This is obviously a God's name or something to do with religion or, something. And so because it's so obvious, but there's no info dumping on it, it's just used as a part of, on the sphincter of capital disorder. So since disorder is capitalized, it lets us know that this is a noun, not a verb. And so therefore it's something to do with world building without spoon feeding the audience. And that's why both me and Marie love that delivery. But for me, at that point, I would close that quote and I would literally have, Cook kicked him in the ribs or whatever. I like the pacing of, we're going to do some dialogue, we're going to do some action, we're going to do some dialogue. And so to me, dialogue splicing, when done correctly, it actually helps the pacing of the story, because then you can see it better. Right now, with all dialogue, you're an anal wart, out, make yourself useful. Like, it's just all this run on kind of dialogue moment. And what is he, just standing there, just saying this stuff without doing anything? So by dialogue splicing in the middle of that, after the insult, before the out, and have him do something, kick him, throw a towel at him, whatever. Even if he just waves his hands in disgust or like whatever, it makes a nice pacing that we can visualize the scene better, as opposed to just this huge thing of dialogue.
The other thing that I would just call out here on this section is the man's arm shook with irritation, not strain. How does John know that? Pray tell. Head hopping.
So yes, technically, in a very, very, very minor way. And I am like the head hopping Nazi, and I would not. To me, it's overwriting as opposed to. Although I wouldn't pop it. Like, if this was one of my private clients or students or whatever, I would let this one slide without comment. If I was going to comment on it, I would literally go, does the not strain add anything? So the man's arm shook with irritation. If you've already stating that it is shaking with irritation, then obviously it's not shaking with any other thing, because it's shaking with irritation. But still, you're right, 100% right. I'm not arguing with you. It is technically head hopping. We don't know why. John can't know why the man's arm is shaking.
I'm very conscious of ascribing motivations to people, like that kind of internal motivations in narration when they're not the POV. To me, that always talks of head hopping.
And it is. The reason why I'm more lenient on that is because of how I write, which is very personal. So it's not. So for me, I'm not describing what the man's arm is doing. I'm describing what the man's arm is doing as John feels it and sees it. So if John feels that the man's arm is shaking from irritation, but this is also a great example of, I actually think this is a missed opportunity for a descriptive noun, where we had all those descriptive nouns and all those strong verbs up above it. In this one, a nice little, the man's thick arm shook with irritation. Like that one little thing now paints the picture of what this guy looks like. If we start painting that picture slowly with an adverb, an adjective here and an adjective there, we can build up this character. And that's, again, choosing the correct targets of your strong verbs and descriptive nouns. So, but again, you are 100% correct. It is technically head hopping. And then now it's a subjective thing. Marie wouldn't do it because on her side, she doesn't like that stuff, and that's her subjective, value or right, I should say. And for me, I'm much more of a loosey-goosey kind of, I don't head hop. I don't want to say that, but to me, I would put this in the category of, you know what? John thinks he's shaken with irritation, and I'm fine with that. And so I'm a little bit more loosey. So my subjective view is also valid to my writing. So neither of us are right, neither of us are wrong. It's just how you, as the author, decide to do that. So, yeah. But it is head hopping. Like, that's not a question. Like, we're not arguing that. We're just on two different sides of, would you allow it as in your writing, and would you not allow it in your writing? And again, that becomes a very subjective thing for the author to decide in their, and that's a part of your voice too. That's where your voice comes from.
Absolutely. Like, and if you're happy with it, you're happy with it. I said I wouldn't do it, but that's me.
Right.
So, and then I do like this little bit too, although I would not. So this is a purely style thing. I started doing this in Sangwheel. All of my made-up words I put in italics. And then I realized how many words I'm going to make up. and how much of my text is going to be in italics. And because these words are all in italics, I can never emphasize them.
Yep.
Because they're in italics. They look weird when they then are in telepathy, which I've got in Sangwheel, or in internal thoughts, or in like they look weird. So my recommendation to you is do not put made up words in italics. One, it makes them jump out to the reader, and it shouldn't, because they're just part of the world, right? It should all be just part of the world. And two, you're going to run into purely technical problems with all those italics.
Yep.
In my opinion, that's
yep. No, 100% agree. I'll go a step further and talk about a mistake I made early in my career. I didn't italicize anything, but I capitalized on my made up words, and I still capitalized too much, which is one of the things that Marie popped me on when we were doing Magic Fall together. But I have toned it down quite a bit. The thing I won't give up is certain things. Like I capitalize the word human in my fantasy, because we don't capitalize it in our world because there's only humans. But we capitalize dwarf and we capitalize elf and all of that because they're a special. Well, then if the world has those, in my opinion, they would also capitalize human. So I capitalize human because of that.
I go the other way with that. I don't capitalize elf and dwarf.
And that's fine too. Yeah. But that's being consistent, in my opinion. If you don't capitalize any of them, okay, great. But a lot of fantasy will capitalize the dwarves and the elves and all of that, and then they won't capitalize human. I'm like, no, you got to be consistent here. You can't just be willy-nilly. So yeah. And so I have to stop myself, like the oido mushrooms. I would naturally want to capitalize it, and then I would have to go, no, don't do that. And so I do find myself still to this day uncapitalizing, because I really have to go, wait a minute, is this just a common word in this world? Okay, it's just an oido mushroom. Oido mushrooms, everybody knows what they are. This common cook knows what they are. The kid knows what they are. It's just an oido mushroom. So that's where I have to be like, okay, great. Don't capitalize it.
I opened that first chapter or chapter 2 of Magic Fall, and it was just it was like being assaulted by capitals.
Yeah.
I was like, why is everything capital?
I do. I still do it to this day, and I have to go back and like, come on, Drake, you don't need to capitalize this. So yeah, I do. I mean, we all have our problems. We all have things that we still make on, that we still do, that are mistakes that we need to improve on. But yeah, so I agree. You shouldn't italicize. It's going to cause technical problems. You shouldn't capitalize everything, because it becomes a little assaulting to the readers. It's like an assault, not insulting, but assaulting. It assaults them with capital letters.
Anything that's anything that's not the beginning of the sentence that's got a capital jumps out at the reader. It hits the reader in the face. It's like, I'm here. So you should use it for things that you want that kind of emphasis on, not in general.
Like the sphincter of disorder.
Yes, like that. That is a beautiful use of a capital.
Yep, because that lets us know that is something.
Yeah,
it's either a part of the religion, it's a god, it's an aspect of religion, whatever. So yeah. And that's my problem when I capitalize too much. It does the same thing as what Marie was talking about on italicizing too much.
Yeah.
So these are lessons learned over years of making mistakes. But yes, 100%.
So I think that's close-ish to time. The rest of this is actually, like, it is well written. I have actually read the whole 1,000 words. This was actually the same. This is the second time we're critting this author. Previously, they also submitted 1,000 words, which we also just about finished. It was the electric horse, where we were like, this character needs a save the cat because she is so unlikable in the setup here.
Yeah.
I think that, this is well written. It's got some minor issues that we've highlighted, but the biggest problem is this needs to be your hook, in our opinion. And here, the verbs are way overstrong.
Yeah. And so that's the thing. When I edit, when you edit, we always edit to the level of the writing. So if we're talking about pretty highbrow stuff, then that means we're not worried about you don't know how to punctuate, you don't know sentence structure, you don't know just paragraph, what goes in a paragraph. I mean, there was a little head hopping, you know, there was I mean, not head hopping, talking head syndrome. There was, you know, a few little things, not terrible in this one, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, it was the other one we're going to do in the next episode that had a lot more talking heads in it than this one. So I'm sorry, I misspoke. But there were a couple of little things that we could have, you know, gone to the granular level and looked at with this. But because it was few and far between, it allows us to take a step back to the next level and start looking at a much bigger, broader picture of editing. And so that's really where you'll find if you're editing other people, you should always edit at the level of the writing. And it doesn't matter where you're at as a writer.
If the writing needs punctuation and grammar and so on, edit at that level. If it needs
and don't talk about where to start the story and story flow and mechanics of structure. Like if somebody is still struggling with punctuation, then let them. That's what I always do is 2-3 things for every one of my client submissions. These are the things we're going to talk about, and they're always the lowest. Yeah, I always go as low as possible, and then once we get those, we'll move up, you know, and we'll keep moving up in the hierarchy of how difficult things are to learn and incorporate into writing. But don't just throw everything at somebody, because they're never going to get all of that. So yeah, so kudos to this author, because when we can really talk about the big stuff, then you know that you're getting a lot of those little things, and there might be mistakes, but you know that they're not egregious, common, every single paragraph mistakes.
Absolutely. The big thing that I would say here is the starting point, also the visualization. Do work on your actual physical visualization. You don't have enough of it. Set the scene.
Wasn't the same in the first one too from this author, if I remember correctly?
It was. We spoke about, it was the village, and he just generically said the village, and we said, well, what does a village look like?
Right.
What is the like? Right. So I would definitely work on that physical description aspect.
Yeah. It's why I call myself a method writer. Before I write a scene, I know the scene that I'm going to write. I've already kind of plotted out. I kind of know where it's going and all of that. And before I actually start typing, I close my eyes and I literally put myself in the scene, and I walk around and I look at it and I take the moment. It only takes me 2 minutes or so, but I take a moment to actually, you know, if talking about that village, what is the bakery? You know, what are the businesses? Oh, look, there's a bakery. What does it look like? What's in the window? What's the porch look like? Are there streamers anywhere? Is there a well? Is there, like, I actually take a moment to imagine myself in this place, so that when I start writing, all of those descriptions can come out much more naturally, as opposed to when you get locked into just being the character, then all you describe is the character's actions. And that isn't good enough. Remember, you're the entire production. You're writing a movie where you are literally the entire production, and the audience can only see what you show them. And if you do not show them, then they have to make it up. And that becomes really problematic when it's like, you know, I'm following this main character, and, you know, she's got blonde hair and blue eyes, and you know, that's the way I painted in my head. And then halfway through, you talk about her, you know, black skin and red hair, and I'm like, what? No, like, no, you got to give me that sooner. You've got to paint that picture, because if you don't, I will make it up. And then when you break what I've created, you've actually now hurt me and my reading enjoyment.
A good test of this might be to put things like this into like ChatGPT and be like, okay, ChatGPT, describe this character to me. And if it hallucinates, you know you haven't given it enough information.
Well, you can tell it to not, you know, you can tell it to
No, but you want
Make
to see
anything
that
up that
because
isn't there.
if it makes up stuff that isn't in your head as the author,
Oh,
then you know
oh,
you haven't put enough text in
but the
there.
danger is what if it makes up something that is in your head and it just happened to accidentally make up the thing that you were thinking? And you're like, hey, look at that, I've made it. It's exactly what I thought.
There.
So yeah, I would probably tell it to not make anything up.
So I think I think we've covered the big things on this one. So well done. And yeah. Think about your opening line strength. If you've got such a clear premise that your character would be thinking, like hit it up front, in the face.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like I said, the warning on that would be if that is not the themes you're playing with, don't promise the reader something and then not deliver on it.
Don't promise a theme that deep if you're not going to deliver on it.
Yeah. Yeah, most definitely.
And I think that is where we'll end today's episode, and we will see you soon for another one.